is the videotape deposition of Mr. Henry Cohen.
In the Circuit Court of the 15th Judicial Circuit in and for Palm Beach County, Florida, Probate Division, case number 502010, CP 004252, XXXXSB, in re Estate of Alan Haynes, deceased, Xylo Marshall petitioner versus Lois M. Haynes as personal representative of the estate of Alan Haynes, and Craig Donoff as personal representative of the estate of Alan Haynes, respondents.
This deposition is being held at U.S. Legal Support, Inc., New York, 425 Park Avenue, New York, New York, on March 5th, 2014, at approximately 10:34 a.m. My name is Sally Brown from U.S. Legal Support, and I am the video specialist. The court reporter today is Allison Fowler, also from U.S. Legal Support. Will counsel please introduce themselves?
Attorney Matt Tornincasa of Shendell and Pollock, PL, on behalf of respondents Lois Haynes and Craig Donoff as the co-personal representatives of the estate of Alan Haynes. Mr. Marshall, please introduce yourself.
My name is Alan Marshall, representing myself as pro se in the estate of Alan Haynes, petitioner.
Will the court reporter please swear in the witness?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Cohen, my name is Matt Tornincasa. I'm an attorney. I represent Craig Donoff and Lois Haynes as co-personal representatives of the estate of Alan Haynes in connection with this lawsuit brought by Mr. Haynes' grandson, Xylo Marshall. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Henry Cohen,
Okay, and your address, sir?
20 West 64th Street, New York, New York, 10023.
Okay, and approximately how long have you lived there?
10 years.
Okay. And what do you do for a living, Mr. Cohen?
I'm a real estate investor.
Okay. Did you know the decedent, Alan Haynes?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell me how and when you first met Alan Haynes?
Alan taught the real estate broker's course in 1976, and I took the course, and we became friendly, and I then worked for him for a year, most of the year of 1977, before going to business school.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that answer.
I worked for him most of the year of 1977 before going to business school in January 1978.
Okay. How would you describe your relationship with Alan Haynes over the years?
Very close. We subsequently became partners. I knew Alan for 35 years. And we had a wonderful and long, enduring relationship.
I apologize. Sometimes I'll be taking notes while you speak, so if I take a moment, I apologize.
That's quite all right.
Just a couple of quick guidelines for this deposition as we get through the background. Because the court reporter is taking down everything we say, a couple things to make her job easier. The first is if you could give me an opportunity to make sure that I get my entire question out before you begin answering. The second thing is because there's a videographer, and I see you nodding that you understand, and I appreciate that. While the video will pick up that you're nodding, the court reporter cannot. So if I ask you a question that has a yes or no answer, if I ask you to respond with a yes or a no, because nods don't show up on a typed transcript, and then ambiguous answers like uh-huh or also can tend to create issues when they get typed. Did you understand those questions?
I understand.
Terrific. And then the last thing is if I do ask you a question that you don't understand, if you could please let me know that you don't understand, otherwise I'll assume you did understand the question.
Okay.
And then the final thing is we're not here to test you. We're not here to quiz you or test your memory. Just here to find out what you know. So if you could please let me know if you are speculating or guessing when you're giving any of your answers today.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. How did you come to be business partners with Alan Haynes?
Well, as I said, I worked for him for about a year.
Okay.
And then we started looking to buy properties, and we subsequently bought properties and were partners over the years.
Okay. What was your business? I gather you guys were purchase and redevelop real estate. Is that a fair characterization, or?
We purchased what's called, most of the properties we purchased tended to be what's called triple net leases.
Okay.
Buildings leased to one tenant.
And how long would you and Mr. Haynes, were you and Mr. Haynes partners?
Well, I'd say we probably bought our first property in the early 1980s.
Okay.
And we still have one property that we're still partners on. So, 80s, 90s, over 30 years.
Okay. In addition to your business relationship, was there a personal relationship between you and Alan Haynes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How would you describe that personal relationship?
He was my initial mentor in the business. As I said, I worked for him for a year, so it was just Alan, his wife, and I were the firm. So we had a very, very close working relationship. And then when I left and went to work at other companies, Alan and I would talk on a very regular basis, almost daily, seeking investment opportunities together. And on occasion we would socialize. I'd say socializing with our wives wasn't that often, but it did happen on occasion. So it was.
Okay. Was Alan Haynes invited to your wedding?
Yes, he was. He and Carol.
Terrific. Did he know your children?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
And was he present at your children's bar bat mitzvahs?
Yes, he was.
Okay. Do you know when Alan Haynes moved to Florida?
I'm just from my memory when he moved to Florida. I'd be guessing, but probably in the late 1990s, perhaps.
Okay. When Alan Haynes moved to Florida, was there any kind of change in your relationship, or did you still stay in regular contact with him?
We stayed in regular contact. I'd say probably the calls may perhaps been a little less frequent, but we still stayed, and we were still partners, and we still looked at seeking investment opportunities together. So we did stay in regular contact.
Okay. This matter in this lawsuit, which we called you as a witness in, relates to an effort by the petitioner, Mr. Marshall, to challenge the capacity of Mr. Haynes to make a will on or around January 2009 when his current operative will was signed. There's also an ancillary allegation by the petitioner that Lois Haynes was unduly influencing Alan Haynes to change his will in January 30th, 2009.
Excuse me.
You've testified that you were in contact with Mr. Haynes on a fairly regular basis. For the period 2008 to 2009, were you still in contact with Mr. Haynes on a fairly regular basis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was.
Okay. And during that period of time, and most particularly with regard to, say, December 2008 and January 2009, maybe February 2009, were you in contact with Alan Haynes during that period of time?
Yes, I believe I was.
Okay. And during that period of time, did you believe that Alan Haynes appeared to lack mental capacity?
No, he never
Okay.
lacked mental capacity
Okay.
during that period.
Okay. When you would speak with Alan Haynes in particular during this period of time, what would you speak about?
We often spoke about our existing property that we were partners in, as well as new potential opportunities that I was looking at, and we would, discuss different offers that I might make for these properties and different business strategies that we would pursue.
Okay. Based on your description, these sound like potentially fairly sophisticated, higher level discussions. Like you weren't just talking about baseball scores. Did Mr. Haynes have any trouble keeping up in these discussions?
He had no trouble keeping up.
Okay.
He was integrally involved and provided meaningful input.
Okay. I apologize, some of these questions seem kind of basic. So during this period of time, Alan Haynes knew who he was?
Yes, he absolutely knew.
And he knew where he was?
Yes, he absolutely knew where he was.
And he knew when he was in time?
Yes.
Okay. Would he recognize, did he know his family members, do you know?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Did you have any concern over his ability to appreciate things like his net worth or his financial position?
He knew his financial position very well.
Okay. And that would come up because you guys were still discussing, or I guess, would that come up in your discussions of possible investments as to whether or not he would participate, or?
Sure, absolutely. But, we also had discussions about his other properties that he was involved with and owned. He was very clear of mind and very clearly able to communicate the concepts that he was trying to get across.
How would you characterize Mr. Haynes' personality?
Alan was very outgoing, sociable, very friendly. He was a very creative, imaginative man, particularly for someone who never graduated high school or college.
Was there ever a time that Alan Haynes discussed his estate plan or estate planning with you?
Yes, we did have discussions about it.
Okay. Can you tell me about those discussions, please? When was the first time you recall having a discussion about Alan's estate plan?
Oh, Alan and I had discussions for decades.
Okay.
He, I'd say, postponed doing estate planning. I think he perhaps feared the concept and sort of avoided it for many years. But got very serious about it. I don't know, probably around the time his wife, Carol, passed away. I always tried to encourage him to pursue estate planning, just so the federal government didn't end up with a lot of his estate. And so I think from the time Carol passed away on, he started to get more serious about estate planning. And then eventually developed a plan that he implemented.
Okay. Did you ever discuss any of the specifics of his estate plan with him?
Yes, we've had some discussions.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about those discussions?
It sort of evolved over time. I'd say that Alan clearly wanted to provide for was this for his will or for estate planning are you referring to?
Well, both in a sense. I guess, do you draw a distinction between the two?
Well, estate planning perhaps involves more outside financial advisors,
Okay.
whereas a will doesn't provide necessarily for that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. I'm using it kind of in the colloquial in the sense of the whole shebang. I do understand that there would be tax planning concepts that need to be applied in terms of making sure you're safe. But for purposes of this, I just want to go through kind of just any aspect of his testimony intent in terms of who he believed he wanted to benefit from his estate. But I also am interested if there were additional discussions between you about those other issues, because I think those bear in his capacity.
I see. It was always very clear that, well, I guess in the early years when Carol was still alive, Alan never anticipated that she would pass away before him. She was 18 years younger than Alan. So I think that sort of caught him by surprise. But subsequent to that, it was always very clear that he wanted to provide for his daughter Lois. I think he was very angry and frustrated with his relationship with his grandson Xylo. I think that his clear intent was to provide for Lois.
Okay. Why do you say that Alan Haynes was frustrated with Xylo?
I don't have all the details, but I know there were times when they would get, I guess Xylo had come out to West Hampton. Alan had a condominium in West Hampton, and I know Xylo had gone out once or possibly more than that. And Alan always was very angry and frustrated with the visits, with the experience, with he didn't go into detail with me on it, but he always expressed a larger sense of anger and frustration with actions that Xylo had taken.
Okay. Do you personally know Lois Haynes or Xylo Marshall?
I personally know Lois. I do not know Xylo.
Okay. When did you first meet Lois?
I first met Lois on a trip. Lois lived in California, near Venice Beach, and my sister lived in California, and I was out visiting my sister. Oh, this must be back in, I'd say, the 1980s, and probably the early 1980s, if I had to guess.
Okay.
It might have even been before that. Might have been the year I was working with Alan. Alan had asked me to visit Lois, just to say hello and see how she was doing, since I was going to California and was not going to be that far away. My sister lived in LA. So I met with Lois, and Alan just wanted some feedback as to how she was doing, and Lois and I had a nice, I think we spent an afternoon together, a few hours together.
Okay.
So that was the first time, I think that was the first time I met her,
Okay.
as I recall.
Subsequent to that first meeting, would you socialize with Lois regularly?
No, Lois lived in California most of the years that I was, friendly with Alan.
Okay.
She only moved to Florida, probably around the time Carol passed away. Actually, she still retained her place in California, but she spent a great deal of time in Florida. Her mother lives in Florida. So Lois was always, quite distant I saw her on a few occasions when she did come to New York. Her sister's funeral, for one, and Carol's funeral as well. There may have been a couple other times.
Okay. Separate and apart from socializing, would you speak with Lois regularly on the telephone or have any kind of regular contact with her?
Excuse me. I would say that we didn't have much communication prior to Carol's passing away.
Okay.
Subsequent to Carol passing away, then we had, I would call Alan, and she was living with Alan at the time in the earlier years when Carol passed away. So we would chat. If Alan wasn't home, I would speak to Lois.
Okay.
So it was always cordial and friendly.
Okay. I just want to clarify, because I know you mentioned before that Lois had kept her place in California, but you also just said she was living with Alan. What was your understanding of Lois's time split as between California and Florida?
After, excuse me, after Carol passed away, Lois would spend more and more time in Florida. And I can't tell you the number of months a year, but it was, just a great deal more. Her time increased over those years from when Carol passed away to, I think she gave up her place in California maybe a couple of years ago.
Okay. Did you ever observe Lois caring for Alan?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
In your time that you observed Lois or Usher, did you ever see Lois threaten Alan in any way?
Never.
Did you ever see Lois bully Alan in any way?
Never.
Did you ever see her try to manipulate Alan Haynes in any way?
No.
Okay. Did Alan ever complain to you about
Let me
Lois?
just rephrase that, because I'd say when I think Lois was encouraging Alan to go into assisted living care
Okay.
in his later years. So I'd say Lois did have some involvement with respect to that, and did encourage him to seek out more permanent day-to-day help. That was when he was getting on in years.
In that Lois getting him, did you see anything untoward in that, or was that just simply a dutiful daughter trying to get?
Yeah, no, it was clearly a dutiful daughter trying to get him the best care that she could.
Okay. Did you ever discuss, or did Alan ever complain to you about Lois?
I'd say in the early years, back in, say, the 1970s and early in 80s, Alan was, I guess, somewhat disappointed in Lois's career choices, and she, for a period of time, was a masseuse, and he didn't appreciate that. So I'd say in those early years, I think he was frustrated and concerned about her and her being able to support herself financially.
Okay. Moving forward to the, let's say, the year 2005 through 2009, did Alan have any complaints about Lois during that period of time?
No, Alan actually greatly appreciated Lois spending as much time as she did after Carol passed away.
Okay.
And, really saw that this was an opportunity for them to develop a much closer family relationship.
Okay. Would Alan ever talk about Xylo with you?
On occasion, not often, but all throughout the years, yes.
Okay. What would he say with regard to Xylo? What did you guys talk about?
Alan explained, I guess the time, apparently there was a car accident, and Xylo was injured in that car accident. So Alan was very fraught and concerned at that time and expressed that to me. I'd say subsequent to that, in ensuing years, Alan expressed a frustration and an anger at actions and decisions that Xylo made that caused him a great deal of grief.
Okay. Did Alan ever express to you that he intended to give Xylo half of his estate?
No,
Okay.
never did.
Do you know how Alan felt about the relationship between Lois and Xylo? Before you answer, I just want to interrupt you. If you need to take a break for any point, this is not a torture test either.
Okay, no problem.
We can go off the record if you need to get water or anything like that.
I'm fine. Want to just repeat your question, please?
Please. Did you ever have any discussions with Alan Haynes about his opinion on the relationship between Lois and Xylo?
I don't recall too many discussions between, where Alan would talk about Lois and Xylo in the same context or the same sentence.
Okay.
They tended to be separate and distinct conversations over the years.
You testified previously that you and Alan had discussed potential real estate investments regularly, practically up through his date of death. Would you discuss additional investments besides real estate, such as stocks, bonds, equities, or were you strictly just discuss that kind of element of your respective portfolios?
Alan's career and life experience was in real estate.
Okay.
And he lived, eat, and breathed real estate. He loved it. And stocks and bonds were areas that he was never never greatly experienced in and was not as comfortable in those areas.
Okay.
I worked on Wall Street and as an investment banker for a number of years, and so I would try to teach him and explain things to him. He sought out financial advisors, particularly when he was in Florida, to assist him, and I think he relied on them to make significant decisions with respect to the stocks and bonds that were purchased. I think occasionally he would hear something or decide to invest in something, but I think many of those decisions, in fact, I think he relied more on Carol. I think he felt, Carol had some of her own money that she had invested, and so she was spending time learning about stocks and bonds, and so it just wasn't an area he was very comfortable talking about investing in, but as he accumulated liquid resources, he had to invest in them. And
Okay. Did you know any of Alan's investment advisors? Did you know who they were?
he may have mentioned one or two names in the past, but I don't recall.
Okay, that's fine.
I think one of them was at one of the big firms. I don't recall. Excuse me.
Do you need to take a break?